Tuesday morning. It is August the 8th, and from sunny Central Florida, I'm WESH 2 meteorologist Eric Burris.
And from Savannah, Georgia, WJCL 22, I'm Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson.
This is Tracking the Tropics. Jeremy, at the very least, in the hurricane season, we're doing this on Tuesdays. We want to make sure everybody knows, though, as things do get more and more active, we will do this more often as is needed. But things have been nice and quiet here the last couple of days and weeks, frankly.
Yeah, the last few times we've talked, it has been very quiet. Nothing really out in the Atlantic Basin that has signs of development here maybe in the next 5 to 7 days. We do have I guess we could kind of term like little tropical waves out there, little clusters of thunderstorms. And this does definitely drive home a point that we have talked about so much.
Yeah, so take a look. Right now around Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, there's a little bit of moisture, a little bit of tropical wave action kind of working over toward the ABC Islands here and the northern shoreline there of South America. Central Atlantic, a nice little wave, and some more activity coming off the coast of Africa. But with water temperatures that are still running at record levels, Jeremy, that's one piece of the puzzle. That's not all of it. There's still a lot of Saharan dust, dry air, and subsidence.
Mm-hmm. And that's just, put it plainly, just sinking motion in the atmosphere. And also whatever effect that maybe a strengthening El Nino has in a little stronger wind at different levels of the atmosphere. A few of those ingredients are kind of counteracting those warm ocean waters. But we do think maybe, especially if we get later August into September, conditions will start to get a little more favorable.
Absolutely. And that's a very normal thing. When we look at the hurricane season by numbers, we're at the bottom of the mountain looking up. And I thought that this was interesting, based on months alone. If you look at the percentages, Jeremy, right? Like we're essentially at 85% of hurricane season activity still ahead of us. So with the tropics quiet now at the moment, that's fine. That's very normal. It doesn't really start to get going. We produce most of our activity August, September, and October. And as you mentioned, those waves that we're watching out there are not really getting going, but the model data looking ahead at least is kind of hinting at things by late in the month, which we knew would happen.
Yeah, and 57% of storms since 1851 have occurred during September and October. So if you take half of the number for hurricane season, which is 14 named storms, 7 added to the 5 we have right now, that would still be near average. Not saying that's how it's going to play out, but even if you take August out of the equation, you're still looking at 2 of the busiest months on average ahead of us, September being the busiest, and then October, especially the front half. Typically, you can get a decent amount of activity.
Well, and then also remember, like last year, we had no name storms during the month of August, and look what ended up happening September, October, and November.
Yeah, and I think people may start to give this another maybe week or 10 days, and we're probably going to start hearing some chatter from people like, oh, hey, maybe we'll make it through August again without a named storm. I definitely don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Not saying we're going to have a hurricane or anything like that blow up, but especially that last 10 days, maybe 14 days of the month. Yeah. Main development region, there are some signs that we could start to see a little more favorable environment for these tropical waves to develop.
Yeah, so let's take a look at the data and see what we've got, okay? First off, this is the GFS 6Z, which is the live, most recent run of the American GFS model. And for those of you that are commenting, certainly we'll get to your comments in a little bit. Let's just kind of go through the weather rundown. Okay, so what this graphic is looking at is pressure anomaly, okay? So in other words, the oranges, that's subsidence, that's dry air or at least stable air. The greens, the purples, the blues, that's lowered pressure, okay? And certainly when it comes to tropical systems, lowered pressure is what you're looking for. And let's just run through time. Notice the Atlantic Basin doesn't really have much. Now, right around here, that's Friday night, Saturday morning, the 11th and the 12th. Maybe a nice little wave coming off the coast of Africa, rolling across the Atlantic there. Nothing significant with it, working into the Caribbean Sea by about Thursday the 17th, but even still, not really showing much signs of development there. And then kind of going longer term, we start to see a couple little dots there at the very end of the GFS run, Jeremy. A couple of little dots indicating the potential of something, maybe even some lowered pressure there in the Gulf of Mexico, but no big significant systems.
Yeah, in GFS, we talk about this sometimes at the end. It has those like fantasy storms or really blows something up. It's been known to do that. The last several runs have not done that. And I would say the GFS is probably right now, when you get longer range, maybe 7+ days out, one of the quietest models.
Yeah.
I look at the European model, the Canadian model. Both of those have hinted maybe we get just into the back half of the month, and there could be a few waves that try to get going in that main development region. We'll see what happens, but I still, like I've said, really believe you get to the last maybe 10 days or so of the month, and we should start to see some activity.
Yeah, it's really remarkable because the GFS usually just loves to throw these phantom fake-a-canes, as I call them, but it's not doing that. Now, let's take a look here. This is the European model, and let's roll that through time, all right? So, again, starting off with stuff in the North Atlantic, but nothing significant playing out. A little wave there across like Cuba, the Dominican Republic, moisture in the Central Atlantic there, unorganized as it may be. And then from there, that's 90 hours out. We continue on. That same area in the Central Atlantic around the 14th, 15th, 16th, trying to show something. Now, the European is a little bit, this is 0Z on Friday the 18th. So it's Thursday night, August the 17th. That's the European. You can kind of see center of your screen, that green dot approaching the Caribbean islands. If we go back to the GFS does not have anything in that window. If we go back to the European, though, it does. So just as you had mentioned, Jeremy, like there's an interesting tidbit. And then if we continue on the global ensemble further out, you've got that little piece of energy there. And then the European at the very end of the run is actually throwing together a couple of decent little tropical systems, at least way out there. And that's the 22nd of August. So that kind of fits into the time frame that you've been discussing.
Yeah, and we'll also have to watch a few of these longer range models are out through like the 20th or even farther out into August. And that was kind of the window that opened up for us, maybe 8 to 9 day period near the East Coast or off from it. There could be an area of low pressure or two. And some of those models are hinting at that, maybe off the Carolina coast or near it. But some of them, again, are just putting low pressure there, but then not really showing tropical development. But keep in mind, it's August 8th, so we still have almost 2 weeks before we would get to that point.
Right. So let's do this. That's all the operational model data. So let's go a little bit of a deeper dive here, Jeremy, and let's take a look at the ensembles, which essentially peel back the curtain looking at the model data a little bit.
Yeah, and I believe you'll probably have GFS or the European,
yeah,
and
we'll
I know you're kind of the expert on these, so you can take it away here.
So think of it like this. When you look at the model data, right, the model data is one run of one model. But what the ensembles let you do is it lets you take that one model and just throw together different ideas. So in other words, it lets you look at what the model is thinking. It's changing little parameters, and the GFS, the European, the Canadian, they have ensembles anywhere from 50 to 100 flavors. So think of it as the same ice cream. You go to Baskin Robbins, and it's that same ice cream, but it's just different flavors. Each one is good. Each one is, some are better than others, but you get the idea. So what we're going to look at is an ensemble flavor here, and this is a different look, but essentially the more little L's that you see closer together, the more kind of ensemble consensus that we have. And through the GFS here, as far as the main development region goes, notice there in the bottom right corner of your screen there, we've got a couple of members kind of showing an area of low pressure out off the coast of Africa. That's the 17th of August. That's 11 p.m. on the 16th into the 17th. So there's that. Couple of lows there. But really and truly, it's not until we get toward the end that we start to see some of those lows developing kind of around the Caribbean, for example. You start to see some of those little L's showing up. And all it is the model starting to say, I'm thinking that there may be some activity here. And when you look at the full basin, there's a lot of confusion there. But if you look around here, what you start to see is east of Florida and the Carolinas and Georgia, around Florida and Cuba, and then back over to the Yucatan. So there's a bunch of lows in different spots. And all that tells me, Jeremy, is that the model is trying to show that there's a favored pattern for development or something there, but it has no clue where, and it has no clue kind of intensity. It's just saying, I think that there may be something out here.
Right. And I think the one consistent thing is, though, in the short term, maybe next 5-7 days, probably nothing.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. So that's the GFS. Let's come out and let's look at the European. Let me go back to the basin view here, okay, and get an idea. So nothing, whole lot of nothing burger. A couple of waves coming off the coast of Africa, showing up with some ensemble support there. For example, this Sunday, if we look at, you kind of see a couple of ensemble members there starting to show some development. And Jeremy, it's just as you had mentioned too, the GFS is I never thought I would say this, the GFS far less bullish in terms of any kind of ensemble support for development here.
Yeah, I mean, the GFS is almost scary how quiet it is, because typically it has something that it's always trying to throw some strength to later in the model run. It is not doing that right now. Obviously, that could be changing.
Right.
I would say the European, which you're showing, and also the Canadian model, they've kind of been mirroring each other from what I've been looking at, where they have a little bit later in the run, which those go out, at least operational, in the 240 hours.
Yeah.
And they have started to have some lows show up, and that's kind of what you have right there.
Yeah, so this is the European, and this is 2 a.m. on Friday the 18th, so 10 days-ish from now. Notice the Central Atlantic, the European starting to show some ensemble support kind of out there. It's a mess. So what this is saying is that the European is starting to say, the environment is going to support stuff. We can't figure it out yet. We can't figure out where or intensity-wise, but there's definitely, if you look at just, and this is one of those things that's just terrifying to look at, but each of these is a different flavor of the European, and it's basically, if you just kind of watch it back and forth, it's giving you an idea that there's stuff, right? And at this point, I think that that's all we can take from it, is that there's stuff. There's going to be activity looking at the end of the month.
And some of these might be something that is a wave that moves off Africa, and then the main development area might develop into a tropical storm or something, fall apart. So far, we have not really had anything in the Gulf of Mexico, especially kind of that western 2/3 of it. We did have a storm earlier head into South America, but I would say the Caribbean and Gulf overall have been pretty quiet so far. And maybe something sneaks into that far southern Gulf of Mexico, but as of right now, the Gulf still is looking pretty quiet.
Well, and that's good, because the reality of it is that while the Gulf may be quiet, we put a storm in there, Jeremy, and it's not going to stay quiet for long. Look at the water temperatures, okay? First off, this is just the Atlantic Basin. Let me just do some clicking here just to give you an idea, all right? Approaching the Antilles, 86, 87 degree waters, right? That's obviously very, very warm. But look at the Gulf of Mexico, okay? You want to talk about water temperatures. The loop current is running nearly 90 degrees, with some spots like just off of Louisiana, out over the Central Gulf, the Florida Keys, the Florida Straits, and even over near Tampa Bay. You're talking about water temperatures this morning at 90 degrees. So Mickey on YouTube comments, is this the calm before the storm? I think that we have a pretty high likelihood of that, where we're watching the patterns. We've been watching these patterns, Jeremy. We know that the end of the month in our long-range forecast cranks things up late August and through the first half of September. I think that once the pattern gets into that phase, we are going to have quite a bit to track.
I think, there's likely going to be a busier stretch late August into probably at least the first half of September. Now, is that going to be those little storms that pop up? Do we get a hurricane to form? And obviously that opens up the window within that time frame of some of our hot spots.
Yeah, so if you're unfamiliar with the hotspots, it's a forecast that Jeremy and I co-author every year. We've done it for a couple of years now. Jeremy's definitely been more proactive on this earlier, and I thank you for bringing me in. But there's our hotspots. The first hotspot is going to be the Carolina coast for parts of South Carolina through North Carolina. And so, that's going to be kind of opening up this more active window toward the latter part of August there.
Yeah, in those hotspots, again, Carolina's there maybe initially. Carolina's had kind of a couple different opportunities within the pattern. Florida, that would maybe be a little more as we go into September timeframe.
Yep.
We'll keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
And again, some of these models may not pick up. We might get a low that's a little more homegrown thrown in the mix at some point that just kind of pops up, whether it's tropical or not. We will see. But so far, so good with hurricane season, even though activity as a whole is above average. If you just look at maybe the last few weeks, it's hard to even imagine that.
Yeah, remember last year was quiet, right, during the month of August. But when we look at the numbers here, like you said, Jeremy, like we've already had 5 named storms. The average through today's date is 3.5 named storms. So even if it seems quiet, we're sitting at an above average year at the moment.
Right. And so that's the number of storms. Then you look at the ACE score, and we're still above average for that. And there it is. Yeah. So I think you can get through about August. I believe it was around the 17th, and then we'll be at average and then start falling below. So that's probably what will happen. We'll get to about average, maybe a little below average, and then we'll see if the season starts to kind of pace with average or fluctuate a little bit.
Kevin's asking, is this good for September prediction to be very active? I mean, my 2 cents would be it's not good whenever we go active because then you have a higher risk of getting hit, yeah?
Right. And I don't know what would term very active, what number of storms would get that definition, but it could be a case where maybe through the middle part of the month it's a little busier and then things may start to quiet down again.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I love about our long-range forecast is the fact that we've not changed it since March the 1st. And I think that it should play out exactly how we thought in terms of the kind of period of more active stuff, and then it'll get quiet again. And then, of course, we reset things for October and November. But I think that we are, at the moment, in that calm before the storms because late August into the first half of September, we get active, and thus we are more vulnerable for strikes. So we really do have to watch this very, very carefully. But to me, it all depends on that Saharan dust because we've got the water temperatures as they are. There's the Saharan dust right now, but let's look at the forecast using computer model data from NASA, among all people. I mean, the smartest brains on the planet, arguably. And just watch how over the next few days' time, another Saharan dust inflection comes out this weekend into next week, and then another one late next week. So, for the next, all the way through about the 17th, Jeremy, it's looking like more and more of these waves of dust coming out. That creates stability in the tropics, thus kind of hampering things down. And that's the 17th, still modeled to have a lot of dust. That's going to have to quiet down for us to pick up activity toward the end of August.
Right, and something we saw earlier when we had a named storm up kind of North Atlantic area. I believe that was Don, and then eventually into a hurricane. So that avoided the dust.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have something near or a little south of the corridor of dust, middle-ish part of the month. Try to get going. But you're definitely right, though. As long as the dust is out there, that part of the Atlantic basin will probably be quiet. We'll see if maybe something gets going north of that area, because the water definitely everywhere is probably near to definitely above average in most locations.
Well, and you bring up an interesting point. Let's just look back at where the dust is right now, and it is over the Atlantic. But notice the Caribbean, there's not a ton. And over the Gulf of Mexico, there's not. So what I would wonder is if we start to try and get, a couple of these weaker fronts, Jeremy, and you end up with a bubble up homegrown storm system, very much like that Memorial Day system that we had.
Right. The one that we still think could have maybe been named. We won't go down that road too much. But
right. That
That was probably, I mean, at least for a coastal area, the most impressive thing we've had so far this hurricane season.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had tropical storm force winds around here, and then we showed that it was close, or there was some sort of maybe a hurricane force wind gust on that ship
Yeah.
offshore. But yeah, we'll have to watch because things can this time of year with how warm the water is. It doesn't take much to get a cluster of thunderstorms, a little area of low pressure into a tropical system quickly.
Particularly with the water temperatures in the Gulf, in the Caribbean, that are running right around 90 degrees. Jamie's asking, do you think maybe one of those storms will start to clean out that dust? If it can form nearby.
Yeah, I don't know. Right now, there's a lot of dust out there covering a lot of real estate.
Mickey's asking, do you think Colorado State is going to have to adjust their numbers down? Interesting question.
I think in the last update, they're now doing updates every 2 weeks, I believe.
Yep.
And as of the last update, I think they kept their numbers the same. Some of the other people that put forecasts out have held with kind of their thinking that, oh, wow, the water's really warm. Should be a lot of storms coming. We'll see, because, I mean, if you just look at climatology, we would really start to have to pick the activity up if we get into maybe the last week or so of August, and we're at these numbers right now.
Yeah.
Then you just have basically September, front half of October, and that would have to be an extremely busy stretch if you want to get like a really high total for the season. So I don't know. We've had 14 to 18 named storms. We'll see where the season ends up. We're at 5 right now,
right.
And we think that little busier stretch is coming August into the first half of September, and then kind of what we always say is October is a bit of a wild card.
It is.
For us.
It's that frustrating part of hurricane season for sure. But here in Central Florida, October and November, we know we can get hit, and we love sending you our scraps up there in the Carolinas and Georgia. But just think about it like this: the peak of hurricane season is the month of September. It's early September. So August, we're just ramping things up. Now, last year was plenty active, and we didn't have any named storms really in the month of August. So September, that's the month. That's round 3 of golf there. That's when you got to do your moving. And so for now, we've still got this lingering dust. I think that we had a very active preseason and early season, and now it's just kind of Mother Nature correcting itself, which is what weather is to begin with. So let that correction take place, and then we'll wait and see. I'm concerned with the idea that once the Saharan dust goes away, Mother Nature's going to be primed for this. I mean, yeah. Right? It's not like the wind shear's crazy down in the tropics.
No, so far not. Maybe we'll start to see that ramp up in the fall. But yeah, we've had the warm water. We have had some tropical waves out there, but there's just so much kind of dust, as you mentioned, the sinking air. That high to the north has been very strong in that development region, so that funnels in at times kind of more of a northeast to east flow.
Yeah.
And that's as I mentioned to you, though, I was looking really long range into September, and generally, if you start to get a high sitting to the north. Below that, you can start to get a little better environment for tropical systems, and it almost looks like maybe that front 2 weeks or so of September, a little more of a setup like that will take shape.
Well, and if that's the case, then it follows our long-range forecast, and if that's the case, it also follows climatology, right? We know that September's the peak. So, all this to say that happily, the tropics are quiet at the moment. Great. But also, don't put your guard down, because, now is when we really need to be making sure we're purchasing our supplies. Now is when we really need to make sure we've got all the things we've got, because, think about it like nobody cares about preseason football, right? It's like, okay, great. The third, fourth string, the ball boy is out there taking snaps. We're getting into the season now. And this is when things should start lining up, and you're going to reveal your cards, and you don't want to have the full house without being able to throw your chips in.
Right. So yeah, we always say it, whether it's preseason, during the season, storms coming, you want to be ready. Most of us, I should say, I don't want to say all, but most of us have lived down here for probably 2-3+ years have been through some sort of tropical system and kind of know what to expect a little bit. Each system's a little bit different, but hopefully once we start getting some activity, it just stays away from land.
100%. Lawrence over on your page is asking, maybe you've answered this already, but why does dust act as such a deterrent for depressions forming? Why don't you take that, Jeremy?
Well, dust in itself is dry air, so you need the moisture out there. When we talk about these tropical systems, they're just laden with moisture. You start wrapping in this dusty, dry air, almost suffocates the system.
Yeah.
And you need a moisture source to keep it going, which obviously it's over very warm, humid water, but that's at the surface, and this dust is more sometimes mid and upper levels.
Well, and you know, and think about hurricanes. Think about tropical systems. They're so big, and they really are arguably the most powerful systems on Earth. There's a reason that they don't happen every second of every day, because you need atmospherically things to be perfect, right? Like I'm watching, and this is going to be a really cheesy analogy, but like I'm watching Big Bang Theory. I've never watched it before. And Sheldon just loves talking about how he's a superior intellect and how he's a once in a generational thing, right? And how special he is. Tropical systems are special systems, and they need everything to be pretty okay to get developed. So you get one ingredient that's not there, and you're going to limit things. Dry air upstairs, it doesn't matter how much moisture you're getting from the ocean. If it's slamming into dry air and dust, which is that dry, it just isn't going to be able to do its thing. So that's why you could have the hottest water temperatures you've ever seen and still not get tropical storms and hurricanes developing, which is very much evident by looking at our current tropical weather outlook. No development expected the next 7 days. We've got a bunch of waves. Mother Nature's wanting to do it, but you just don't have those ingredients in place. Cheesy.
Yeah, and I think a good comparison is like when we talk about severe weather, sometimes there's like maybe a moderate threat of severe weather, and it ends up not occurring. And over land, maybe not dusty dry air, but instead there's a cap that exists or an inversion in the atmosphere. And if you can't break through that, you won't have your thunderstorms and severe weather. While out in the Atlantic, if you don't have your ingredients in place, you're not going to have a tropical system develop.
100%. So that's why when we do our forecast back in March, it's trying to use all the tools in our tool chest. It's not just one or two ingredients. It's looking at overall patterns and as we always talk when we put our forecast out, Jeremy and I talk, I feel like in the winter months more than I even speak to my own wife sometimes, because we are just so, hey, look at this, look at this, because it's like putting together a hurricane forecast using all of the elements that we do takes more brain power than any one of us can. We really do have to put our brains together,
Yeah, and I mean, we have to make some assumptions, projections forward, and then put it all together, and you come up with the forecast, and then you can judge it, I guess, when the season's done.
Okay, so Eric's asking, not me, does this mean we will have an active October and November hurricane season? That's our kryptonite, Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, the method we use basically goes out into maybe very early October, and then we start to study the pattern, and we get the clues in October and November for what may lie ahead for the next season. Sounds kind of crazy on the surface, but we've done this for quite a while using this method, so it's worked for us, and people always say if something works, don't change it.
Hey, and if it works, work it, right? It's kind of like AA. It doesn't work unless you work it. So you have to, and you keep learning and you keep doing better and you try and study it and improve on it. But that's one of the tools that we have in our tool chest. And as Chris Pierce reminds us, you can't call it crazy. Gary gets mad at that.
Right.
Betty says Colorado Springs is green this year. Rain and storms all the time when is normally the dry season. Is this affecting our Florida hurricane chances? Patterns, jet streams, Earth is always trying to balance things out, Jeremy. And I think that as much as we've got wind shear in with El Nino, we're not seeing that at the moment. As much as we're talking about Saharan dust, eventually that's going to go away. And so, you just kind of have to watch as the pattern keeps shifting, and we're going to go more active late August, early September. And then for October, November, assuming that El Nino continues to hold on, I would imagine that those should be perhaps a little tampered down, especially if we get some storms upwelling into September a bit.
Yeah, and I think the climatology starts to favor the Caribbean, and that's an area that if you start to get a little more impact from an El Nino, it may suppress activity down there. So certainly October, November in parts of the Atlantic Basin could be a little bit quieter than average. We'll see what happens as a whole. But hey, as we move forward this month, I think the next time we talk, or especially on the 22nd, we will have something to talk about.
Oh, for sure. I mean, as the new models come in, it's going to be interesting over these next really 5 to 7 days just to see how they're handling that end of the cycle, that 300 hours plus out. Because we're already seeing the wave machine trying to get going. It's just not doing much. But something tells me the Saharan dust should start to fade here in the not so distant future.
Right. Yeah. So, all right. Well, I want to thank everyone that's hopped on. Some good questions for today.
Yeah.
And next time, we'll see what those ensembles show, because they're just starting to hint at maybe something a little longer range.
Absolutely. So we'll always do this on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. And then should we need more, we will extend the coverage to make sure to get you the right information. Because the other thing, too, social media loves to throw out hype. And Jeremy, I think if there's one thing that you and I really have bonded over, it's those schmucks that hype. Us not wanting to be those people.
Right. I mean, it's so easy to get weather information these days, but it's really tough to get maybe trusted sources of weather information. So we always do our best to kind of level with everyone, let you know what we are thinking, and our thoughts always extend to our newscasts as well when we're on.
And we're here to answer your questions. And I think that that's what's so great about the internet, is that we have this ability to do it. So we'll see you again on Tuesday. And in the meantime, have a great week. From sunny Central Florida, I'm Wesh 2 First Warning meteorologist Eric Burris.
And I'm Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson from WJCL 22 in very hot Savannah, Georgia.
Yeah, let's just try and take it easy and figure out how we're going to pay these air conditioning bills, huh?
That's rough.
All right. See you later, Jeremy. Bye, everybody.
All right. Take care.